We are well into September and there are still more questions than answers as far as NASCAR silly season is concerned. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I woke up this morning, start of a new week, and I rolled over in bed, pulled up my phone, silenced the alarm, and then I looked at my home screen, looked at the date, and I saw September 14th. And I thought I was still in a trance or something. I had to do a double take. September already? With everything that's happened this year, it kind of snuck up on me, but we're nearing the end of 2020. And especially when it comes to NASCAR, we're 2 races into the Cup Series playoffs, y'all. We're less than 2 months away from declaring a 2020 champion across all 3 series. And with the hiatus and all the double headers and everything since we've been back, it snuck up on me. I didn't realize how far into the year we really are. As of today, we are exactly 5 months away from the Daytona 500, the start of the 2021 season. That's not as much time as you guys might think. And when I sat down today to plan this episode, I kind of realized we still have a ton of questions about where big name drivers are going to be racing next year. I mean, other than the fact that we know Jimmy Johnson's not coming back, at least not full time. We know Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney are staying with Penske. We know Hendrick Motorsports outside of the 48 car is staying pretty much the same. But other than that, we still don't know where Erik Jones, a 2-time Cup Series winner, driver of the 20 Joe Gibbs racing car right now. We don't know where he's going. We still don't know where Bubba Wallace is going, who's been all over the headlines the last several months. We don't know if Clint Bowyer's staying where he's at, going to a new team, or just retiring altogether. We don't know yet. We don't know what Matt DiBenedetto is going to do next year. There's still the lingering question of Kyle Larson, among many other drivers, Corey LaJoie, Daniel Suarez, Ty Dillon's team just went away. There's still so many questions about so many drivers, and it's kind of overwhelming. Anyway, in today's episode, I'm going to go down that very line, and I'm going to talk about all of the top free agents, of which there are many, and we're just going to talk about what the latest word on the street is as far as where some of these guys may go. A lot of this is rumors, but some of it is based on actual facts, actual things we know have happened behind the scenes that might point towards a certain development. A lot of the comments I get on videos still, and a lot of the questions I get from you guys during live streams have to do with silly season. Who's going to this car? Eric, who do you think is going to go to the 48? Who's going to the 43? Those are the questions I answer the most frequently, or find myself faced with the most frequently. I don't usually have very many good answers for them, but today I figured we'd make an attempt to look at as many of the silly season possibilities as we can and talk about some of the likelier possibilities as well as maybe some of the unexpected announcements that could come very soon. So sit back and relax. Let's get started. Let's go and start with the driver that I believe has the most leverage as far as this year's silly season goes. The guy whose decision I believe has the most weight behind it and could very well dictate the way the rest of silly season goes. Let's start with Bubba Wallace. So first and foremost, we already know Bubba Wallace announced last week that he is leaving Richard Petty Motorsports at the end of this season. That came as a little bit of a surprise to me, but Bubba Wallace is making it clear that he wants to go somewhere more competitive, somewhere he thinks he can contend for wins in the near future. And right now, Richard Petty Motorsports doesn't really look like that organization. We know that Bubba Wallace in recent months has gathered a pretty stout lineup of new sponsors, companies that are brand new to NASCAR in some cases. It's not known exactly though which of those sponsors maybe are still locked into a deal with Richard Petty Motorsports versus which of them are only dependent on Bubba Wallace. That's still not entirely clear, but per a report from Adam Stern, Sports Business Journal, he says that Bubba Wallace is going to bring an estimated $15 to $20 million of sponsorship with him wherever he may go in 2021. That's a pretty significant number. Now, while Bubba Wallace did have a contract offer earlier this summer from Chip Ganassi Racing to drive the 42 car, Jenna Fryer from the Associated Press reported last week that that offer has since been rescinded once Bubba Wallace seemed to indicate he wasn't super interested. Now, of course, that offer could still come back. Chip Ganassi 42 car is still an option for Bubba Wallace, but per a recent report from Bob Pockrass at Fox Sports, he believes that Bubba Wallace is waiting to see if Denny Hamlin can get a deal done with Toyota to start a brand new Cup Series team next year. Bob Pockrass mentioned in an article today something we have talked about on the show, that Denny Hamlin had been in conversations with Richard Petty Motorsports to possibly buy part of that team and turn them into a Toyota team. But according to Bob Pockrass, those conversations have mostly halted, and now Denny Hamlin has turned his attention towards Germain Racing, a team that recently announced they are going to sell at the end of this season, or at the very least are looking to sell now that Geico has left them as a sponsor. Denny Hamlin's looking to buy Germain Racing, and with the help of Toyota, turn that into a brand new Toyota-backed Cup Series race team. And per Bob Pockrass, at least it sounds like if that happens, and it sounds like there's a possibility that could be announced within the week, Bubba Wallace would likely be the top candidate for that new ride, that new car. Would it still be the 13? I'm not sure. Whatever it ends up being at Hamlin Motorsports, whatever they'd end up calling it, good chance Bubba Wallace would be their driver if that deal comes together. And now questions have been raised about whether or not Denny Hamlin can own a NASCAR team if he drives for a different team. There's kind of a gray area in the rulebook. NASCAR president Steve Phelps spoke to the media a couple weeks ago about this topic, topic. And when asked about this, he indicated that Denny Hamlin would be allowed to own another NASCAR team and drive for Joe Gibbs Racing as long as he was able to prove to NASCAR that this new Hamlin team wasn't just a fifth Joe Gibbs Racing car. So still not super clear, but it does sound like Denny Hamlin would be allowed to own, or at least partially own, a different team should a deal like that come together with TRD, with Toyota, and maybe Bubba Wallace. So people asking where Bubba Wallace is going to go, I think there's a lot dependent on whether or not Hamlin and Toyota can strike a deal and buy up a new team, make a new team. If that happens, I think Bubba Wallace goes to this new team. But if that doesn't happen, there are plenty of other options on the table. Now let's talk about another driver whose name hasn't come up that much this silly season, Daniel Suarez. Suarez signed a one-year deal with Gaunt Brothers Racing, which is up at the end of this season, and Daniel Suarez is likely going to be looking at all of his available options. Now in an article I read this weekend, reporter David Smith talked to Richard Petty Motorsports co-owner Andrew Murstein a couple months ago, and Murstein talked about how ever since he's gotten into the NASCAR Cup Series as a co-owner of Richard Petty Motorsports, one of his main goals has been to increase the amount of diversity in NASCAR. We saw this when they hired Eric Almirola, a Cuban-American driver, and then again, of course, with Bubba Wallace, right now the only black driver in the NASCAR Cup Series. And during this conversation, apparently, Murstein mentioned a few drivers that the team would look at if Bubba Wallace were to walk away at the end of the season. Of course, fast forward now a couple months, Bubba Wallace is leaving Richard Petty Motorsports, so now this becomes a little more relevant. According to David Smith in his article, Andrew Murstein mentioned Kyle Larson, who of course is half Japanese, and Hailie Deegan as possible replacements for Bubba Wallace in the 43 car. I know, you guys are gonna say, what, Hailie Deegan? No, this has to be a joke, right? Hailie Deegan is 19 years old. She's in the middle of her first full-time ARCA season, and the results have not been great so far. No way Hailie Deegan ends up in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. Come on now. I'm just telling you guys what other reporters are telling you guys based on their conversations with actual team owners. Anyway, I don't think it's realistic, even David Smith in that article, and I think even Andrew Murstein knows it's not realistic that Hailie Deegan would be tapped to drive the 43 next year, but that's sort of where Andrew Murstein's head is at. And we've talked about on this show recently, with Bubba Wallace leaving and taking a lot of that sponsorship with him, Richard Petty Motorsports is going to need a driver who can bring some of his own funding. Daniel Suarez might very well fit that description. Suarez doesn't bring a whole lot of his own funding, but he does have a long-lasting relationship with CommScope/Aris, and of course he also has a deal with Coca-Cola. And Daniel Suarez, of course, currently the only Mexican-born driver in the NASCAR Cup Series, might be exactly what someone like Andrew Murstein is looking for. So keep an eye on that one. Now let's talk about Erik Jones. Erik Jones is in the middle of his worst season of his young Cup Series career. It's already been announced he's out at JGR at the end of the season, and while for several months there, it sounded like he was the likely frontrunner to replace Jimmy Johnson in the 48, nothing seems to be announced at all. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of conversation around Jones these days, unfortunately. Now, per reports, Hendrick Motorsports a couple months ago was toying with the idea of shrinking from a 4-car team to a 3-car team, but it sounds like some of their pre-existing contracts with Chevrolet heavily incentivize Rick Hendrick running 4 full-time teams next year, so it sounds like they are going to find a driver to drive the 48, and Rick Hendrick made it sound a couple weeks ago like he's already picked that driver, and they're just waiting to announce something. Erik Jones is likely still a candidate for this ride. I wouldn't be shocked if Erik Jones gets announced as the new driver of the 48 car, but Erik Jones doesn't bring any of his own sponsorship that I know of, and Hendrick Motorsports, again, toying with the idea of shrinking down to a 3-car team, they likely would like a driver that's either really cheap or a driver that can bring some of their own funding to that ride. Erik Jones, with 4 years of experience, I don't really know how cheap he is. I'm sure he'd be willing to take a pay cut if it meant he stays in competitive equipment for another year as opposed to going to like a lousy team, I'm just saying. But I don't know that. And again, Erik Jones doesn't bring a whole lot of his own sponsorship, so I really don't know if Hendrick Motorsports is still the best option for Erik Jones, or the most likely option, I should say. I think he's going to have to look at teams like Chip Ganassi Racing, Richard Petty Motorsports, if Suarez or they don't land somebody else. We'll see. Erik Jones is a big question mark right now. Now we've got to talk about Kyle Larson. Of course, Kyle Larson has not raced in the NASCAR Cup Series since March, since the shutdown. Of course, he was suspended from NASCAR indefinitely, fired by Chip Ganassi, fired by Chevy, fired by everyone. But Larson landed on his feet in the dirt racing world. He's won almost everything there is to win in a sprint car this year. And he stunned people a couple weeks ago by winning in a dirt late model in just, I believe, his second dirt late model start ever. Now, per reports, Larson has not yet applied for reinstatement, but it does sound like if he was to apply, NASCAR would more than likely approve him to be reinstated to NASCAR. Jenna Fryer from the Associated Press did an article last month about Kyle Larson, sort of kind of an interview with Larson for one, but also highlighting a lot of the things he's done the last several months off the racetrack, you know, in light of course, his mistake and his suspension. In that article, it mentions things Larson's done, things that he's volunteered at food drives. He's continued his work with the Urban Urban Youth Racing School, something he's been doing actually for a few years that's supposed to help minorities get involved in motorsports. And in that article, they point out that Larson has not publicized really any of this. So I definitely gained some respect for Kyle Larson reading that piece. But of course, everyone is going to have a different opinion on whether or not they believe Kyle Larson should be reinstated in NASCAR. Everyone's just gonna have a different take on that. I think without a doubt, people were affected differently by the thing he said, the mistake he made back in April, I guess it was. So everyone's gonna react to that differently, and we'll just see what happens. The question is gonna be, will a NASCAR team owner be willing to take a chance on Kyle Larson? Can they find funding? Can they find sponsorship? Can they get a manufacturer maybe to even sign off on hiring Kyle Larson? Is that possible? Now, Bob Pockrass, again from Fox Sports, wrote today that he believes Rick Hendrick is having some of those conversations. He believes Rick Hendrick is trying to pull some strings with Chevrolet behind the scenes to get Kyle Larson approved so that he could put Kyle Larson in the 48 car next year. I know people are going to have some varying, probably widely varying responses to that one. At the beginning of the year, before everything went down, Hendrick Motorsports was one of the likeliest places Kyle Larson could land next year. He was highly linked to either the 48 or to Stewart-Haas Racing because of his relationship with Tony Stewart. I don't know how likely this is. Of course, we know Chevrolet has already fired Kyle Larson, so him going to a Chevy team doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But again, according to Bob Pockrass, what he wrote about today is maybe Chevy wouldn't sign like a personal services deal like they do with most teams. Guys like Alex Bowman, Chevrolet sends him a nice car when he signs with Chevrolet, when he signs with Hendrick Motorsports. Same with like Joe Gibbs Racing. They all got nice Toyotas over at JGR. If Kyle Larson goes to Hendrick Motorsports, there just might be a stipulation in that contract that Chevy is not going to do any personal deals with him. So it still might happen. It still could work out, even though his relationship with Chevy is pretty frayed. I personally think if we're just going to look at talent, Kyle Larson's the most talented race car driver on the free agent market right now by a considerable margin. His Cup Series numbers are hit or miss. Keep in mind he drove for Chip Ganassi his whole Cup career to this point. Ganassi is a good team, but not really a championship contending team, and he's won, 6 races with Ganassi over about 6 seasons? It's not terrible, not awful, but sure, everyone's gonna have different opinions on Kyle Larson, but it does sound like Hendrick Motorsports is interested. And it doesn't shock me. Again, Larson, I think, is the most talented driver on the market. So, of course, they would at least see what they can do. NASCAR is about results. It is ultimately a sport where the best competitors thrive. At least in theory, that's how it's supposed to work, I guess. So we'll see what happens with Kyle Larson, but that'll be an interesting story to follow. Let's talk about Stewart-Haas Racing. Clint Bowyer specifically. Clint Bowyer, of course, his contract is up at the end of this year, and he has still not signed a contract extension with Stewart-Haas Racing. Greg Zipadelli from SHR said last week that they're hoping to keep their driver lineup mostly the same, but he didn't rule out the possibility that Chase Briscoe, of course, who's had a great year in the Xfinity Series this year, might get promoted into the Cup Series should someone like Clint Bowyer not be able to re-sign with the team. Personally, if Clint Bowyer is not able to re-sign with Stewart-Haas Racing, I'd be surprised if another team picks him up. He's older than most of the other free agents. In fact, I think he is the oldest free agent of the ones we're talking about, at least on the market. And let's be honest, he's a good driver, great personality, but I don't think he's ever, outside of maybe 2012, shown that he can run for a championship. And the fact that was kind of the only year, that makes me think it was sort of an outlier, not necessarily indicative of the norm. The norm for Clint Bowyer seems to be like a 10th place guy most weeks if you put him in a good car. And that's not bad, but my point is Clint Bowyer is not going to be the hottest prospect on the market. So if he gets let go from SHR, I don't see him signing anywhere else, and more than likely he heads to Fox Sports and joins the TV booth full-time next year. And I think if Clint Bowyer walks away, yes, Chase Briscoe is the likely replacement. There's still a possibility someone like a Larson or some surprise could come out of nowhere, but I think it's likely Chase Briscoe gets the nod. Briscoe's got, 5-6 wins this year. He's cooled off a little bit the last couple months. I don't necessarily think Briscoe is a surefire Cup superstar one day just yet. I'm not ready to make that declaration yet, but he's certainly talented and I think would hold his own in a Cup Series car next year, so that might be a great choice. Let's briefly talk about some of the other high-profile free agents on the market, or potential free agents. So there's Ty Dillon, who, as was announced last week, his current team, Germain Racing, is selling at the end of this year, or is looking to sell, because Geico, their longtime sponsor, has left the team, or will be leaving the team. Present tense, future tense, I don't know what I'm talking about. So this raises the question, where's Ty Dillon go? Where does the second Dillon brother, I hate to call him the second Dillon brother, but these days Austin Dillon is certainly stealing a little more of the spotlight. Where does Ty Dillon go? There's a possibility he goes to RCR. Of course, his grandfather is also Richard Childress, and that currently is only a 2-car team. They could go back to being a 3-car team. Maybe the 31 car comes back. I don't know. I genuinely have no idea what Ty Dillon does from here, because Ty Dillon's a driver who, he doesn't excite a whole lot of people. This isn't really any discredit to him. He just has driven for a mid-pack team his whole career and has run mid-pack, so people don't talk about Ty Dillon so much. He's certainly not a hot prospect or anything like that, so I don't know where he ends up. I think if he doesn't end up racing for his grandfather in some capacity, he likely isn't racing in the Cup Series full-time, or at the very least is not racing for a competitive team full-time. So, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to say where Ty Dillon goes next year. I don't really have any speculation on that front. Another driver whose future is pretty unclear to me is Matt DiBenedetto. DiBenedetto made the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs this year for the first time. He's finally in a competitive car, more or less, but per Matt DiBenedetto, that was a one-year deal with the team option to extend beyond this first year, and that's an option that the team has not yet exercised at this point. And like I started this video saying, we're in September. Matt DiBenedetto made the playoffs this year, which I think was the most important box to check this season, but he doesn't have a win, and the way things are going, the first two races of these playoffs, he's likely going to be out in the first round unless he can pull off the upset at Bristol this weekend. I'd like to see Matt DiBenedetto get another year in this car. This year is just so screwy with no practice, no qualifying. It's a new team, a new crew chief he's had to work with. I don't think it's entirely fair to fully judge someone's skill based off of this season and this season alone, but it's a harsh business, and Team Penske / Wood Brothers have Austin Cindric, the son of the president of Team Penske, having a great year in the Xfinity Series. So I don't know. Matt DiBenedetto's not bringing much funding to that 21 car himself. I'm sure there's heavy incentive for Team Penske to promote Austin Cindric next season, but if that happens, Matt DiBenedetto might be out of luck, and I don't know where he lands beyond that, at that point. I hope he would stay in a competitive car somewhere, but so much about NASCAR is money, and as far as I can tell, Matt DiBenedetto does not bring a whole lot of his own money to the table, unfortunately. But hey, Matt DiBenedetto, fan favorite. Maybe a sponsor takes a chance on him. I'm surprised more sponsors haven't jumped in on that. It seems like he's got a lot of momentum behind his name. When I went to the Bristol All-Stars earlier this year, fans cheered louder for Matt DiBenedetto than they did for most of the other drivers, honestly. He was probably top 5 or 6 as far as number of cheers from the crowd. I was a bit surprised. But anyway, Matt DiBenedetto, we don't know where he's going next year. Could stay with Wood Brothers, could go elsewhere. Big question there. There are some other drivers. Corey LaJoie, still no word where Corey LaJoie might go next season. I've heard rumors he could end up with JTG Doherty, especially because it sounds like Ryan Preece may not get to sign an extension with the team, in which case I don't know where Ryan Preece goes. Ryan Preece has certainly not impressed anyone his first 2 years in the Cup Series, but again, dude was great for Joe Gibbs Racing on a part-time basis in Xfinity, so we know he can drive at least a little bit. We'll see where he ends up. Those two drivers, I don't really have any sort of idea where they go. There's no real rumors, or there's definitely no reports out there, so kind of just wait and see. But those are most of the big names that are knowingly on the market at the moment, and that's kind of, I don't know, I took a long time getting through that, but that's basically your checkpoint, so to speak, as far as this year's silly season is concerned. I think over the next few weeks, we're going to continue to see more dominoes fall, but I do think a lot of what happens this offseason is dependent on where Bubba Wallace goes. And maybe beyond that, if Denny Hamlin and Richard Petty Motorsports or Germain Racing or Toyota, and however it works out, if Hamlin creates a new team next year, that's going to change a lot of stuff. So really just waiting to see if that announcement comes, and if it does, look out, because this silly season's going to go fast at that point. But whew, thank you all for sticking with me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed. That's all I've got. Be sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel. We talk NASCAR almost every single day on this channel. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. And a big thank you to my fantastic Patreon supporters. If you want to support Out of the Groove as well, please check out that top link down in the description. Really and truly means a lot to me. Yesterday, I announced the California Clash, an iRacing event themed around the iconic film Days of Thunder that will be broadcast live on my channel. I'll be hosting it alongside NASCAR legends Bob Jenkins, Alex Hayden from MRN, and Justin Prince, Bobby Labonte among drivers scheduled to race in the event. Hope you all are excited for that. We'll have more information on that exciting event coming very, very soon. But thank you all for watching this episode. I'll see you all again very soon. Have a great rest of your day.